I was reading in the literature in Dr. Mary's book, Dr. Mary Claire's book, she was saying that some of the things that have actually been shown to help with menopausal symptoms, like hot flashes, are not just your herbs and not just your diet. All of that is incredible. And we're going to talk about that here in a second. But they actually talked about yoga, meditation, and cognitive behavior therapy, where you're literally reprogramming your brain, because we need to reprogram, allow ourselves to be okay with ourselves. Every woman that sits most of my clients are women. I've had a few men through the years, but most of them are women. But every woman that sits in my office, they usually have an enormous amount of shame because of the weight that they've gained. It's always about weight, right? There's this huge thing about weight because of the illnesses that they have. And they feel like they've somehow not just let themselves down, but they've let others down as well. And so it's circling back to that self-love, self-care aspect that really plays a huge role in what we do. And it's not selfish. Like I said, it's probably, gosh, has anybody ever been around an inspired woman? I mean, have you ever been around a woman that's just full of purpose and full of inspiration? You just want to hitch your wagon to that, don't you? They're like, oh my God, I want that. And we can all have that. We just have to give ourselves permission to have that. So I love that you're talking about that. One of the things that I want to talk about is I'm really nerdy about the science, about how our bodies work. And if you are, the books that I talked about are going to be fantastic. But I wanted to just go over some basic things that it didn't matter what book I was reading. There were just some basic things. And Courtney, I know you're going to relate to this, but there's some basic things that we can do to take care of ourselves. And it's things that we probably don't know. We talk about eating a good diet, but what does that actually mean? So I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking about some key things that were brought up that help women during perimenopause and menopause. And we're going to start with what you talked about, Courtney, at the beginning. Is Dr. Mindy Pelz has done an amazing job talking about intermittent fasting. And I encourage people to pick up a book. Dr. Mary Claire says the same thing about intermittent fasting. Our bodies no longer need as much glucose, as much sugars to survive. We actually move more towards ketones. And what happens when you fast is that your body actually can produce those ketones and create that energy source for your body. So intermittent fasting is something that I encourage people to look into because it's fantastic for the perimenopause and menopausal woman, like the research behind how effective intermittent fasting is. And so what is intermittent fasting? Intermittent fasting is where you allow the digestive tract to rest. So you have more time with your digestive tract resting, AKA you're not eating, than you do for when you're actually eating. And so intermittent fasting can look something like if you're doing intermittent fasting could be like, I'm done eating at 7 p.m. tonight, and I'm not going to eat again for 12 hours. I'm not going to eat again or drink a sugary drink. You can have as much water as you want, but until 7 a.m. again tomorrow. So that's like 12 hours. That would be 12 hours of eating and 12 hours of not eating. When you move into intermittent fasting, it's where you extend that non-eating window a little further. So you might say, I just finished eating tonight at 7 p.m. and I'm not going to eat or drink anything that's going to raise my blood sugar until tomorrow at 9 a.m. And then you're going 14 hours without eating instead of just the 12 hours. And then you go to, 10 hours that you have what's called an eating window. There's all sorts of research about it in the books. There's a huge misconception about it, and it can be done comfortably and easily, but I encourage you to do your research, grab the books, because you want to slowly move into this. This is not something you're going to do overnight. A lot of people think, oh, I'm just going to skip breakfast and lunch tomorrow and I'm going to be great. No, you're probably going to crash really hard. You're probably going to be irritable. It's probably going to cause a nosedive in your hormones. You're going to get a headache and you're going to be like, I'm never listening to that podcast again. So I want to encourage you, when you look at intermittent fasting, to make sure that you read up on, do your research and find the simple ways to get into that. Courtney, have you experienced with intermittent fasting yourself? I was wondering if you had any personal. experience with it.
Yes. Yes. I read Dr. Menopause's book, Fast Like a Girl, and I love it. It makes so much sense. And I like the sciencey part about it too. And there's so much in that book about hormones. And I just ate that up. In fact, due to perimenopause, my memory doesn't retain everything as well as I wish at this point. So I would like to read it again, as well as the Menopause Reset book that you mentioned. And I do believe she has another book coming out next year about menopause.
She does.
But yeah, I have done intermittent fasting. And in fact, I followed her protocol for a while, and I'm inspired to start again. And I felt great. Like all the bloating that I would experience throughout the month, it just disappeared with the intermittent fasting. And I believe that is because my whole digestive system had got a break.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It can do what it needs to do. And it was hard. Like if I felt hungry, that's really hard, because I'm very motivated by hunger, just like my cat, and motivated by food. And that is hard. To not eat when you're feeling hungry. But I just kept my eyes on the prize. And yeah, there were some days where I did eat because my body needed it. I could feel it in my bones, and I was just weary, and I needed the calories. And so I would try to stay as strict as possible. And I would also be forgiving to myself, when I needed to break the fast for whatever reason. But I do like how she sets it up, and how she sets it up for women who are still cycling, with the different lengths of fasts and which foods to incorporate into your diet to help with your hormone balance. And I found that easy to understand. I felt like it made a lot of sense, and I personally felt better.
Yeah. And I love that, because same thing. When I read her book, she talked about progesterone needs more carbohydrates to produce in your body, and estrogen needs more fats to produce in your body. And so she talked about that. So when you're looking at your cycle, there's times where you do not forego the carbs. You definitely want to have the carbs, and we want to have the healthy carbs. We talked about that before. There's your highly processed, highly toxic carbs, and then there's your fruits and your starchy vegetables and all that type of stuff. And then she talked about times where, what I thought was interesting when I did it was that I could tell that I was hungry for carbs when my progesterone was low. And so I would try to have things that were, heavier in carbs. And then I would ask myself, what cycle am I in? And then I might eat an avocado because it's higher in fiber and higher in fat. And so I encourage people, if you're going to do it, look into it. Don't just try to do it, because I don't want you to do it incorrectly. And not that there's a wrong way to do it, but like Courtney said, you can feel hungry. But if you very slowly move into it over several weeks, this isn't something you're going to do over a week. Over several weeks, you slowly adjust to it. It can make a difference. But intermittent fasting is something that is super, super great for the perimenopause and menopausal woman. There is so much great research out there about the timing of it. So I encourage you to look into that.